Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar about how Quotient's big data leadership drove a BI and Hadoop evolution. My name is Michael Moreno. I'll be your host and moderator for today. I'm the Senior Partner Marketing Manager at Cloudera. And today we have a great lineup of speakers with Eric Sitt, Director of Engineering and BI at Quotient. A lot of you may have known Quotient as coupons.com. Hopefully you've used them before. And then also Irina Lewis, who's Senior Director of Marketing at AtScale. So before we begin, we have a couple questions for you guys just so we can get to know you guys a little bit better and hopefully direct the conversation more on your interests. So as we kick things off, we have a question. What is your role in managing big data at your company? So we have various selections there. Please take a second to look through that and select the one that applies, and we'll wait 1 second as you do that.
Which side? Which side? Oh, you said.
All right, so I think we got most of you guys in, and it looks like most of you guys are others. But we have plenty of data analysts and data scientists. Thank you very much for joining. Like I said earlier, I think this will be a great opportunity for you guys to understand what Quotient is doing and how they modernize their architecture. One more question before we get going into the content. Where are you in your big data journey? So take a second to look at that. We'd love to understand where you're at in adopting Hadoop, adopting technologies like at scale, and implementing new big data projects. Let's take a look. All right, looks like a lot of you guys have projects in the works or developing project plans. That's great. We've seen a lot of great interest, especially around customer insights here at Cloudera over the last few months. Got a lot of webinars, a lot of interesting content come out recently as many of you are adopting new tools in the BI analytics space. So with no further ado, let's get going. So today's speakers, like I said, we have Eric Sitt, Director of Engineering at Quotient. He'll explain a little bit about his role here in a second and what he does and how he does it. And then Irina Lewis, she's my partner in crime today from AtScale, with over 17 years of experience in business intelligence in the software world. And then myself, Mike Moreno. I've spent the majority of my 15 years here in the technology industry working in a variety of roles. Prior to joining Cloudera last year, I worked at Intel in both sales and marketing with some of their largest customers. So very excited for us to get going this morning. And so today's agenda is pretty simple. We're going to go over why you would consider Hadoop for BI and understand how Quotient used Hadoop with AtScale and their implementation of their new modernized architecture. Then we will give you some insight on how did you get started, what are some of the lessons learned that Quotient gained from their own exercise and implementation of a modern data architecture. And then lastly, just finish things off. We'll finish things off with a Q&A. Feel free to ask questions. We have a question, and we have a chat console in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Please address any questions you like to any one of us, and we'd be gladly welcome to answer at the end of our content. So Eric, could you give us a little more insight on your background so the audience can understand where you come from and what you do?
Thank you, Mike. This is Eric Sitt. Nice to meet everybody, and to be able to share some of the story about our journey on moving to SQL and Hadoop. And I am no doubt, like some or many of you, have spent many years in building data warehouse and analytics. And I started before the big data revolutions become mainstream, and then has worked at various companies, large and small, including Yahoo, and then before I came to Quotient Technologies. And at Quotient, my role is I'm responsible for the BI and data platform, including all the technologies, and also working with the business users to meet the business needs, and then to also anticipate growth in the business, new products, and all the implications on BI and data platforms. So a big part of what we're doing right now is to grow the platform as the company is expanding with new products, and as company expanding its network of CPG clients and the network of retailers. So that's where we are focusing on, and then this is why this topic is dear to my heart. So that's the bit about me.
Thank you very much, Eric. So obviously the name of Quotient's changed a bit over the years. Like I mentioned earlier, you guys were known as coupons.com. Could you maybe give the audience a little insight into Quotient, what you guys are doing nowadays as a company?
Sure. So we were formerly known as coupons.com Incorporated. We have rebranded to become Quotient Technology, Inc. And then what we are, and we are a technology company that uses data to help retailer and CPG brands to reach the consumers, using point-of-sales data to influence consumer purchasing decisions at the right time. We are working with three main constituents: consumer packaged goods brands, the mass retailers, and consumer directly, and also through our partners. So for CPG brands, we use data to target and personalize promotions for consumer in order to find the right audience and influence their purchase decisions. We also help retailers to drive foot traffic to the store and increase the store loyalty among the consumers. And then,
just a quick question for you, Eric. Any idea like how much data you guys might ingest in any given day, just across all those different areas?
I can tell you that we have about 1.7 billion transactions in 2015, and in terms of promotional activities. And then we also get data from retail partners, and so in the tens of billions.
Wow. Great. All right. Well, let's keep on going. The next question I have for you, how did you know it was time for a change to your data architecture? Obviously, with 1.7 billion transactions last year, I mean, that's a lot to deal with. What were some of the key things that motivated for that change?
So the motivations are threefold. And so if I can step back, and I think many of us are facing in the technology, in the analytic and the data warehouse world, are constantly facing the issues of business growing and then more data coming in. And then this is especially true for Quotient, and where we have new product, new platforms, and then new partnerships that are driving demands on data warehouse analytical platform capabilities to scale with the business now and to scale it into the future. So the traditional data, what we found is that the traditional data warehouse technologies are no longer able to meet the needs. In some cases, it doesn't allow us to do the complex analytics that we want to do. And so with that, we know that it's time to change. And then some of the additional points to pay attention to is that we not only want to scale with the demand of the business, we want to actually put the right tools to the right folks at the company allowing them to be able to work at the speed of the data, and then without having to relearn or learn new skill sets. And then this ties back to the agility and the time to market components that's very important to us. So if we look at the traditional data warehouse stack, which is the one that I was referring to earlier, what we have is generally a more complex set of tools that we need to manage. And then it requires a development team and business team with different roles and responsibility and skill sets. And invariably, because of the time it takes to ingest and manage the data, generally for the speed of analysis and for the ease of analysis, we end up with multiple copies of the data. And then it also makes it a little harder to actually update the data in near real time. So, and because of all these complexity, then the flow of the data is much more rigid and harder to change. So what we're looking for is actually moving to a stack for a modernized data stack that's trying to address some of the issues that we talked earlier, including complexity, time for analysis, and the speed of ingestions, and availability of metrics. So we opted for a more simpler technology stack, and then with the help of the tools like Cloudera distributions and also at scale. So we are essentially, and then with the introductions of Impala, which enables SQL on Hadoop at scale, we're able to significantly simplify our technology stack and then enable us to open possibility that we didn't have before.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, we are hearing a lot of similar stories from some of our other customers about the transition from a prior architecture focused on standard data warehousing onto a more modernized architecture, obviously with Hadoop at the core. We at Cloudera pride ourselves in being the fastest, easiest, and most secure Hadoop distribution in the market today. We've been really driving our customers to modernize their architectures, not just on Hadoop and just the core Hadoop of scaling your structured and unstructured data in a data lake, or what we like to call enterprise data hub, but also really going into BI analytics, using tools like at scale to accelerate the speed that you're able to self-service analytics to consumers inside your company. Along with that, we are focused and driving more real-time analysis with our customers by using tools like Impala, and also looking at the ability to service other multiple sources and streams of data at the same time. So like what Eric was saying, we are truly at the center here of being the enterprise data hub to capture all this data, both structured and unstructured, and basically making it easy to kind of get beyond the standard data marts model where you had to have multiple copies, and being able to just have one copy and really bring the analytics to the data versus the data to the analytics. And so when we talk about faster and being more agile, like what Eric was saying, it's really trying to drive that story of self-service BI, which everybody's looking for. The financial person, the data scientist, the analysts inside the manufacturing organization, having them have the power to get the data they need versus waiting IT to support or waiting for an ETL process to be accelerated. And then in conjunction with that is the story of being easy. So no more moving data from one database to another or into data marts and making multiple copies. And then lastly, security being huge. I mean, the ability to data govern, we have what's called Cloudera Navigator, which can assist with that, and certainly look into that if that interests you. But when you're in a position like Eric's, you want to have confidence that no other person inside the organization, especially a multi-tenant organization, is fooling around with the data. And so with that said, I want to pass it over to our great partner at Scale here today, Irina, to talk a bit about the journey and some of the things that AtScale is doing. Irina, do you want to take it from here? You there, Irina? She may be on mute.
Can you hear me?
There you are.
Okay, great. So thanks, Mike. Laddering on top of what Eric had said and what you had said, so many people in the world today, businesses, they're struggling because data is growing, things are moving fast, and Hadoop, while it's been around for 10 years, it's really, the adoption is just gaining momentum. And at the same time, that whole idea of self-service on Hadoop, it's not just, data isn't just for data scientists. More and more people are needing access. And what we found in a recent survey of over 2,000 individual organizations, enterprises, was that while many of them are looking at their journey, they're like considering Hadoop, many like those in our audience today, close to 60% of all those companies though have not yet been able to kind of take that step and provide the self-service BI. Now, the operative word on this slide is yet, because all of them had the desire, just like Eric was describing, needing, and what you had mentioned, needing to match the right tool to the right folks and getting them access to all of that data. And so while 60% haven't been able to provide that self-service BI on Hadoop, at the same time, those companies who do put BI on Hadoop are able to then actually see and realize more of the value. So companies are seeing the value. Everything that you showed earlier about it being a single source, kind of the hub of that information, still being secure and giving IT the control that they need and security, and yet still being able to bring all the data to create that entire picture, the whole story. Those who put BI and self-service on top of that drive more value for Hadoop. And for some of the organizations out there in the survey respondents, that value was driving more Hadoop adoption. Some of that more value was getting users, the scientists, the analysts, and even the decision makers out there in the field access in the tool that made sense to them. And so while these numbers don't seem very high, it's because it is a relatively new thing. And so there are only some innovative companies like Quotient who have taken that step, and they are putting that interactive BI on Hadoop. And I really appreciate Eric's story about an evolution, because a lot of organizations we've talked to are worried. They're like, where do I get started? How do I even get into this? Can I do it? It seems like a big undertaking. So Eric's story and how he's going to walk our audience through kind of the evolution, which talks about not just changing overnight, but one step at a time, is going to really resonate and supports a lot of these findings that I shared with you here today. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mike, and we'll get Eric to share more of his story.
Great feedback there, Irina. And certainly in positions like you and I are in marketing, I mean, on a daily basis, I want to have greater visibility, understand, obviously like the audience here today, I want to understand who's calling in, who's listening to our webinars, and being able to have analytical tools that help me do that and then in turn report to my management is so key. And it's in marketing, it's in finance, in so many different places, and all these companies are looking to really have better control and access to that data. So with that said, Eric, I would love to hear about your journey into Hadoop and kind of some of the things, the use cases that you saw or that you're driving on your big data journey.
Thank you, Mike. So it is indeed a journey, and then it's done over a period of time, and then with different releases with lessons learned. So we started out like many organizations is that discovering the Hadoop data platform, it can scale. So we can start putting the data into Hadoop, and then so that's what we've done as the first step. But soon what we realized is that we have a gap between having all these data in one place and be able to support the analytic workload and the business analysis, and without requiring the business user or the development teams to develop platforms or programs specifically to provide the analytics. So that's where we got very excited when SQL and Hadoop becomes available. And so we started using this for analytic workload as well as ETL. And then because it speaks SQL, which is the language for a lot of the business analysts, and so we were able to actually transition the business user to SQL and Hadoop without a lot of anxiety from the business user. And once they get onto the platform, they start realizing that how powerful the platform is. And then we also looked at enabling reporting and then data discovery too on top of the big data platforms. And then so one of the tools that we are using here is MicroStrategy, and then that's our reporting too. But in order to actually provide additional performance gains, we are also using at scale as layer on top of Hadoop and Impala. So the theme for us is actually performance and SLA. So we're trying to make sure that we have the boost in performance, while at the same time we don't sacrifice some of the other criteria that are important to us. So I've talked about us getting excited on SQL and Hadoop because of the ability to leverage existing investment and skill set. So we bring the data, we bring the analytics to the user instead of the other way around. So the other benefits, obviously, because this big data is a scalable platform, it must perform. And then it needs to perform better than what we have and actually be able to scale with the increase in workload and the data volumes. But at the same time, we're mindful that we cannot compromise security and governance. And so with distributions such as Cloudera CDH, we have a suite of tools where we can actually secure the Hadoop environment and then be able to provide specific row-level securities. And then last but not least, we are using tools like Scale that are built on top of Hadoop and Impala to provide us consolidated business schema layer. So what we're trying to do is actually, while we can remove the data silo, we also want to remove the ability for the business users to get the data and create their own metrics. We like to be able to create a metrics, model the data, and be able to publish to the business user using different that are using different tools and interfaces. So I want to go a little bit deeper into the BI data platform architecture at Quotient. So if you look at this diagram, what we have is various data sources with different amount of data and then coming in different frequency. And so what we have done is actually we are using the Hadoop technologies, both in Impala for some of the batch analysis and for more complicated complex transformations, and then and also using some of the real-time tool to allow us to flow the data through faster. And then it all kind of comes together into the Cloudera data warehouse, and then with at scale on top. And then from there, what we are doing is actually we are opening it up, the data warehouse, to our business users through various tools and to support the ad hoc complex analysis and support targeting and reporting, data science, and also integrating with other part of our platform.
Great. So Irene, I think you're going to talk a little bit about how you view that in conjunction with what you're seeing at scale on people in their data journey.
Yeah, everything that Eric, I really appreciate you sharing that level of detail. You know, a lot of the individuals on the line today, as I mentioned, when we surveyed our 2,000 individuals out there in organizations, some of the challenges are like, how does this look? How do I architect it? So it really is helpful for people to see the level of architecture and how you streamline that, where you're going with that, because then they can relate to it in context. And so, again, to take that to the next stage, Eric, you've been, the whole title of this section is how you started a BI on Hadoop evolution. And what I thought was really interesting when you described it to me is you yourself said, you know, it's a big undertaking. And so there's a lot of key aspects that you were mentioning before that can help make it more of an evolution, not a revolution, not like, to overuse the term, boiling the ocean. And in that same survey, what we found is that those individuals, those organizations who have undertaken the journey or who are looking at a Hadoop journey typically start in the lower left-hand corner. So where it says operational efficiency. So when Hadoop first started out, what we found was users said, great, it's inexpensive storage. I'm going to just throw all of my data in there, which was one of the huge benefits. You don't have to throw any data away, right? Throw it all in there. It can get as big as it needs to be. And especially in the growing volume of data, as Eric mentioned, that's a great thing. But as organizations proceed along their journey, then they realize, hey, we can do more with this. There's so much information in there. Maybe we can start analyzing brands and analyzing multiple years and go back compare multiple dimensions that really weren't available. I couldn't fit into a single cube. But now I've got all of this information in there in Hadoop. But that step into the rationalization and agility really made it only available to data scientists because it still had to be, scripts had to be written and so forth. But now the final stage and the final step in that Hadoop journey is that information advantage where organizations are saying, hey, I want to make this available to my decision makers, to the analysts, to all of the individuals, whether they're basic or they're advanced. And that's where that self-service BI comes into play. So whether you take this journey and you jump all in, straight into self-service BI from the very beginning, or whether you take it as a small step-by-step and make your own evolution, either one of those is appropriate, but we definitely are seeing, based on the survey and based on Eric's experience, more and more people are definitely jumping to that BI on self-service on Hadoop, self-service BI on Hadoop, but doing it in an evolutionary way. And so I just wanted to share a little bit about of that, what we're seeing out there to help guide users in where they can think about the different steps. And it also, I think, ladders up to what Eric has been saying. And so with that, Mike, I'd like to turn it back to you so we can get Eric to share some additional details on his journey.
Yeah, definitely. And certainly here at Cloudera, this journey is spot on to what we're seeing. You go back a year or two ago, most of what we were talking about at Cloudera in regards to Hadoop was the enterprise data hub and just kind of that whole data lake model of really ETL offload and leveraging your existing infrastructure, your existing data warehousing structure, and maybe augmenting it to get insights. But now there's just so many amazing tools like out at scale today that you can really use to accelerate things and really support that BI self-service. And so with that in mind, Eric, I'd love to know what were some of the key results that you saw upon modernizing your architecture, and then also what were some of your lessons that you learned, if you don't mind?
Thanks, Mike, again. With the scale of Hadoop, we're able to scale with the data growth. And then another benefit is that now that we can scale with the data growth, and like Irina said, not throwing any data away, we can consolidate the data to provide actually 360-degree view of end-to-end activity for how the consumer use the promotions and then and match them up with the shopping activities. And with that, we also able to eliminate a lot of the data silos because all the data are in one place and more accessible to the business users. And that helps eliminate some of the data movements that would actually make the path of the data pipeline longer, and actually has helped us in meeting our SLA with the business, and also meeting it more reliably. We are able to put the data into the hands of the business analysts in a way that allows them to leverage the existing tools and skill sets. And then, so this removes the barrier for business to leverage the big data technologies. And then, in addition to having the data all in one place, allowing the business to access it, obviously we are benefiting from the performance. And as I have touched on earlier, so what we are able to see is actually query performance that's reduced from hours to minutes. Not only does it enable the business to reduce the time from data to insight, which is obviously very important for Quotient and the business. This level of performance gains also opens up possibility for more complex analysis that were not possible before. And so one of the key considerations that we have I've discussed earlier is to ensure that we don't compromise on data security and data governance. So we are relying on we're partnering with Cloudera to use the suite of tools, and then also use the help to actually secure our distributions. So, and also we are using the tools to manage the cluster. So we use it to build the ETL, we secure it via LDAP, and then with Kerberos to secure the access to the systems, and we also implementing encryptions on the data. So that's all good, and but we want to actually be able to, like Irina said, be able to turn it into a self-service models where the business users is comfortable and able to access the data, and then be able to build analysis and some of the analysis and some of the targeting personalizations. So what we want to be able to do is actually that model once and publish to multiple interfaces. And that's where we utilize S-Scales to not only consolidate the business semantic layers, and also because of the adaptive aggregates, we're actually getting added performance and eliminate the ETL, the needs to build ETL to maintain some of these aggregates. And then, so in a journey to self-service analytics, we want to be able to build the Hadoop in a way that allow the business user to do self-service, but while at the same time be able to provide a consistent set of metrics. So I talked earlier about some of the possibilities and some of the improvements in the business process. So one example we have is actually we are heavily into personalized promotions. And then what we've been able to do and do better is connect the dots between consumers in terms of the activity, in terms of the online activity and the interactions with our partners, either through the clickstream data that we have, and then the use of the promotions and some of their shopping activities. So this allows us to actually, with the better connected data sets, allows us to uncover some of the patterns and drive, be able to better drive consumer behavior. And to the consumers, actually we provide better and more relevant targeting and personalization promotions to them, so enable them to save more money as they shop. and then to our retail and CPG partners. We are able to provide more immediate promotion results analytics to them.
That's great, Eric. And I think that what's really interesting about what you were saying is that when you, with those end users, that even though you're gaining this information about what they're doing, you're turning that into a benefit for them. So not only are you gaining greater insights, the whole customer insight is such a big move and such a big movement, I should say, across the world right now. Everyone, the customer is king. And what you've shown here is by aggregating all of the data into Hadoop and using it as a central, whether it's online and offline experiences, you're able to connect those dots, as you said, and then turn that into a benefit for the customer, which then obviously benefits Quotient as well. But it's for your partners, for your customers, and everyone, that this whole BI on Hadoop, it's not just about technology, but it translates into a customer benefit across the way. So I thought that was a really interesting point that you shared there. What I wanted to ask you to go into a little bit of detail here, we're actually getting a lot of questions around how adding AppScale to the mix with Cloudera. So you've chosen Cloudera as your Hadoop option, and Impala for the SQL on Hadoop. And so I know you ran a series of benchmarks of reports having AppScale kind of sits between your BI tools, MicroStrategy, your Excel, and so forth, and Cloudera, and connects the two for that self-service experience. And what we had talked about before is it would be helpful for you to kind of describe that benchmark and describe the setup and kind of help the audience understand why you chose AppScale and how it's performing for you.
Thank you, Irina. So I am able to share some of the performance improvement based on the benchmark that we have done here at Quotient using AppScale. The driver for using AppScale is not only at the performance, but also some of the other advantage that I've talked about. What we are especially interested is in the adaptive aggregates capability that AppScale provides. So through proof of concept and benchmarks, we were able to see it, and then in terms of the increase in performance. And then what we are also able to see is that under different set of workloads, as we are trying to open up this platform to more business users to drive adoptions, so we expect high concurrencies. And then what we found is actually that AppScale as a tool can help us maintain some of the performance, and then keep the response time and the analytics times for the business user to a manageable level. So to wrap up, I like to just offer some of the lessons that I personally learned and through this journey at Quotient. So there's really no good time to start Hadoop, and then it's an evolution. So you want to start as soon as possible, and then start small and evolve over a period of time. So we all know that we talked a lot about speed and performance, and but that's not sufficient, because at the end of the day, as I've referred earlier, the powerful Hadoop performance and this powerful platforms need to be matched with the business user, their ability to use this platform effectively. And then as we go through the journey and drive to more self-service mode, then we need to be mindful about that the number of users that would be using the platform concurrently would grow as time goes by. And with self-service, we want to be able to provide defined set of analytics as a starting point. And so that's why we actually focus on modeling once and then be able to publish it to a multiple interface. And then at the end of the day, we want to be able to remove some of the silo. And so we look at this architecture as a way to actually help us eliminate a lot of the additional data movement.
Excellent, Eric. Excellent. So where do you see things going in the future for Quotient and what you're doing with big data analytics at Quotient?
So we are looking at constantly on the lookout for technology advances. Hadoop as a platform is evolving and evolving very fast. And there are improvements on a number of different fronts that will allow us to manage the platform better, and then basically manage platform better, and also simplify some of the ETL jobs, and allow us to integrate with data-driven application better. So that's the areas that we'll be looking at as the next step in the journey.
Excellent, excellent. And like I mentioned earlier, I mean, the modern data architecture and be able to support BI analytics is truly, like we talked about, is what we're seeing being adopted today, and I think why everybody's here. And so it's really driving a lot of businesses to be even more data-driven than ever before. And, you know, like you mentioned here on the left, you know, the Kudu, Spark, HBase, Impala are all tools that you can use in many different ways and fashions in conjunction with any number of our partners like AtScale, for example, to really accelerate your BI analytics journey. And at Cloudera, we continue to innovate, and you'll see things from us like how we're updating Cloudera Director so we can support things both in the cloud and on-premise. So the Hadoop ecosystem continues to evolve, and I think everybody here can learn and continue to grow and continue to accelerate the speed to analytics is where we see things going. What about you, Irina? What are you seeing at AtScale?
So, Mike, I think everything that you and Eric had said is absolutely apropos. You know, Hadoop is going to continue to mature. The BI on Hadoop is continuing to mature, and it's becoming actually the status quo. That's what people are wanting to, the direction that they're going. Something that both of you, that Eric specifically said that I thought was interesting as well, that ladders up to kind of the direction of things that we see, is it's about that self-service piece. And that self-service piece doesn't just mean self-servicing the data scientist or self-servicing the business analyst, but self-servicing the business user. And to do that, where we see the BI on Hadoop going is allowing all of those types of tools that allow business modeling, right? Business users don't think in terms of scripts. They think in terms of dimensions, of hierarchies, and so forth. And so what we see, the direction supports the SQL on Hadoop, the Impala, and so forth, so that those data-driven decisions are available to all. And based on all the data, that's where Hadoop comes into play, and at any time, and that's where the self-service. So it just ladders up to all the messages and the story of Eric's evolution as well.
Excellent. So we're just about done with the content piece of today's webinar, and obviously we would want to throw out a call to action to everybody, and really focus on the continued development and learning of Hadoop and BI analytics, and accelerating and evolving as companies, as human beings. So I mean, obviously at Cloudera, we're one of the leaders in Hadoop education. Go to our website, check out some of the resources we have. Also, when it comes to accelerating your BI on Hadoop, take a look at AtScale, and also at the URL there, atscale.com//B5 things. And then lastly, hopefully today's webinar has been beneficial to you in understanding what Quotient went through, what Eric went through in implementing a modern data architecture for BI. Certainly take a look at their company and take a look at the content will be available. We'll have this webinar in syndication if you wanted to listen to it again as well. So moving on to the Q&A section, we have a number of questions here. It looks like we have about 10 questions, actually. So we have quite a bit. Hopefully we can get to it with the time allotted. We have about 15 minutes left, and then we'll be about done for today. So let me take a look here. I have some questions. I have a question for you, Eric, from Andre. What was the end-to-end time it took for you to get from start to finish on your new modern architecture?
So we have started the journeys about 2 years ago, and then the different pieces was implemented over a different period of time. And then we have continued to evolve. And then like some of the things that I said earlier, we first start ingesting data into Hadoop. And then we look at Impala, and then starting using Impala, and also then looking at incorporating at scale. So as for the questions of how long did it take to start realizing values, it depends. For us was fairly quick, and simply because by the time we actually get to Impala, we are dealing with a business challenge that our existing data warehouse cannot support some of the more complex analysis. So they are in dire need of switching to a platform that's more performant, and then be able to answer their questions. And once they have actually started getting comfortable with it, then they start actually thinking of incorporating SQL and Hadoop, and it's better performance in terms of uplifting the complexity of the analysis. So I guess it depends, and then as where you are at in terms of the journey, where the company's needs are. So that would be my answer.
Great. Have a rather technical question here for you, Irina, from Naveen. Would you be able to provide any guidance here on how do we ensure consistency of rules, definitions, et cetera, with self-service access tools like at scale? And maybe, Eric, you could also help on that question.
Yeah, I can offer the initial one. So this was specifically a thought leadership webinar, so we wanted Eric to speak as much as possible, but I can describe just really high level. At scale really acts as a metadata layer. So it does sit on the Hadoop cluster on an edge node, but it acts the way to specifically answer your question. How do we ensure consistency of rules, repeating the question, definitions, and so forth with self-service tools? So at scale is the metadata layer for all the definitions across all of your BI tools. So our platform, again, that sits right there with Cloudera and Impala on the Hadoop cluster, we allow you to have that as a consistent layer for all of your definitions, security, and so forth across your BI tools centrally. And so a modeler, kind of a user of at scale, would be the person empowered with managing those rules in one place. And then all the end users, regardless of their BI tool, would then benefit from that. So you would set the security so that with that scale, so that whether Excel was coming in, whether Tableau, whether MicroStrategy, as Eric was saying, whether any of those, that would be the central modeler. Hopefully that answers your question. Eric, I'm not sure if you wanted to add a little bit more detail there.
Thanks, Irina. So I would just say that with the benefit of actually having 360-degree view of data, at Quotient we are investing in the modeling of the data. And then on so that and also with that skills tools to help us ensure that we have a single schema that can be published to multiple interfaces. We also work with the business users to define the set of metrics, and then we will evolve over time to add additional metrics that they need, so that they will satisfy some of the analysis that they need to do. So I would say it's a combination of having the technology and also the combinations of actually establishing understanding with the business user on what their needs are and enforce a consistency of the rules and the definitions with the business user as well.
Great. And then I have another question for you, Eric. Why didn't you just use your BI tools directly against the Hadoop cluster?
Sure. Our experience is that a lot of the BI tools have made advances talking directly to Hadoop. But as we dig deeper, we find out that there are limitations and gotchas. And also many of these BI tools also have its own business semantic layers, which is what we try not to have multiple copy of those. So, and then what we also found that is that the different BI tools works better with different interfaces. Some on MPX, some SQL, and so at the end of the day, what we've looked at is that what's important to us is to be able to consolidate the business semantic layers and remove the need to move data to another meta map to enable some specific BI tool that's not talking directly to Hadoop cluster at this stage. So that's why we actually chosen not to just directly hook up all the BI tools with Impala.
Great. It looks like there's one directed towards me and Cloudera from Malik. What tools does Cloudera have for analyzing semi-structured and unstructured data? I mean, we don't necessarily have specific BI tools like an at-scale per se, but I mean certainly tools like Impala that can be used with in BI analytics certainly can be used for both for essentially using in a structured SQL-like language to pull data. But, I mean, any given tool in our Hadoop ecosystem can be used in any fashion, like HBase, like Impala, like Kudu, to do any number of BI analysis. Is my high-level response to that question. I don't know, Erica, any thoughts there on what you see as critical from a Hadoop Cloudera perspective as tools that are integral into your BI analytics strategy?
So we use a number of tools, and then so there's no particular set of tools that we favor over the other sets. Obviously, I mean, Impala is important to us, but also some of the other tool sets like Spark and the ability to do encryptions, ability to secure the server, ability to manage the cluster. They are all important components in this ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. And we're getting close to the top of the hour. I had another question. Somebody was asking, what is the sequence of using Flume, Kafka, and Spark? I think with ETL. I don't know, Eric, if you've used how you're using those tools in your implementation. Maybe you could talk to that.
So sure. The way we use Flume, Kafka, and Spark is allow us to increase the throughput and the frequency with which we can process some of our partners' data. So we use Flume to actually receive the data, and then the data is actually passed on to Kafka, where we would actually look at the specific structure they are provided to us. And then all this is fed into a Spark ETL pipeline, where the data is transformed into a fashion that can be placed into Impala.
Great. And then one more question here. What is the size of your data and cluster I think earlier you mentioned you had about 1.7 billion transactions last year. I ran the number. That's like 24% of the world population, which is pretty large. I think it'd be interesting if you could just talk to the cluster size a bit and kind of what you're managing.
Sure. So our Impala cluster, we have multiple clusters, and our Impala cluster, which is more relevant to the discussions, has more than 50 nodes. And in terms of the data volume, it's driven really by a few large fact tables in the data warehouse patterns. And they more than 100 billion records combined. And they're consisting of really software activities from our retailer partner, consumer use of the promotions, and then also other click streams activity as well.
Great. And I'll field one last question for today from Andre. He would like to know, this is what he had, how is historical data managed in this architecture when all source data is current view only? For example, how would you support point-in-time reporting?
So we actually have, when we migrate to Impala, we have kept as much of the, we kept most of the historical data. And so in terms of current view, so, and also we work with our retail partners to actually get historical data as well. So we are not really just looking at the current view of data. And so in terms of point-in-time reporting, we are using basically our data model to support time-in-point analysis. And then also at the MicroStrategy reporting levels, we're also building reports and analytics that support that.
Great. Okay, well, with that, I want to thank everybody for calling in today. Hopefully you found value in hearing Quotient's story along with a little bit from us at Cloudera and AtScale. Eric, I really appreciate your time today. And with that, everybody have a wonderful Wednesday and rest of your week. Thanks a lot.
Mm-hmm.